Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Vallaeys. I'm your host. I'm also the CEO and co-founder at Optimizer, a PPC management software. So today we wanted to talk about something a little bit different than PPC. And specifically, we're going to talk about the evolution of how searches are done. Are people still searching or are they now looking at answers? Are we talking about answer engines instead of search engines? Now, to help us develop that topic, we're going to talk to someone who actually does have quite a bit of a background in PPC, Kasim Aslam, and he has made the transition from PPC specialist to answer engine optimization specialist. So, with that, let's get rolling with this episode of PPC Town Hall. Kasim, welcome to the show. Good to see you again.
Fred, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
All right, all right. So for the people who haven't seen you on one of the previous podcasts we did, remind them who you are. Your stature in PPC, I believe you were at once ranked, was it number one or number two?
No, you know it was number two because I was right behind you. That was a sneaky way to bring it up. Yeah, I was number two in the top 50, I think. I built the number one ranked Google Ads agency in the world, though.
Nice.
So our ad agency, if you searched anywhere in the English-speaking world, we were the first agency mentioned in the organic listings. I sold it in 2022 for an 8-figure sum of money. I had $100 million in ad spend under management. We got as big as an agency can get when you're dedicated to Google Ads. You know, we kind of tapped out that market, and then I jumped ship, but at the exact right time, to be honest with you, because it's been an interesting ecosystem, and I know you probably know that better than anybody.
Well, let's jump right into it. So you said a good time to sell given all the changes, but let's unpack that. What do you mean by that?
My agency died on the vine, dude. When I sold, I had 200 clients. 9 months later, I think we had 130. And it wasn't the acquisition party's fault at all. It was the model that we were running, which was an old school model. It was fee plus percentage of spend. And then very hub and spoke, client manager and ad specialist. It didn't really work any longer. And the reason, and I'm about to slander our collective environment, so you can stop me if I say anything that you feel is, either not true or just stupid. But what organizations started to realize was I don't need you to press the buttons in the dashboard anymore. I need somebody outside. So it's pre and post click. And even if they wanted and needed us to press the buttons, in so many instances, the buttons kept going away. I mean, it was right as Performance Max was really reaching a pinnacle. I think we were the first agency to adopt Performance Max. I still had the highest traffic Performance Max YouTube videos that existed. I think we cracked the code there in a lot of ways. And Performance Max ate ad agencies alive because it took so much of our ability to optimize. I mean, it was a black box, and so much of the black box was reselling our own traffic back to us, but in ways that you couldn't see unless you were playing things like, attribution and post-click and follow-up, and probably a lot of the stuff that you do at Optimizer, excuse me. And so for a standalone agency that wasn't playing an AI-driven game, and we probably should have been, we were caught so flat-footed, dude. It was nuts. And people were bringing things in-house. They were bringing on full-time marketers, and they were looking for just more of a holistic solution. And I just lucked out. I was playing a game of hot potato. I didn't know I was playing, and I happened to hand my hot potato over to somebody else before it kind of blew up. So, and I've seen other agencies that were kind of caught where I was caught.
Well, congratulations on making that move at the right time.
Dude, yeah. I'm just blessed.
I know, right? But many of our listeners today, they still hold the hot potato themselves. And it certainly has been challenging for agencies due to the reasons that you're explaining now. I think when it comes to Performance Max, it actually has gained a lot of the settings, a lot of the insights, reports to give the advertiser more control over the whole thing. But I think the level of control that you have and the level of insight you need to have is quite fundamentally different from the very simple PPC of the old days.
Yep.
For example, when it comes to the new channel reporting that Google does, you can't just look at how is YouTube performing versus search because they are two different beasts. They should work together to give you better results. So if you split it out, you're not getting a holistic picture, and then you might end up making some bad decisions. But that said, more of that data is back. So the smartest advertisers and the smartest agencies, they can absolutely do something with this if need be. But I 100% agree with your point about people don't hire agencies to push buttons for them, right? The
Yeah, oh yeah.
button pushing, that should be done by agents. These are AI agents. That's the level of work that they're going to be really good at. And that's where you should look to automation. But explaining to the agent what is your business goal and what are the constraints of your business and how should we approach new experimentation, that's really where the value still lies. So, I think that's hopefully where agencies still have a little bit of an opportunity to distinguish themselves and maybe stand out from the pack.
I
Any
think you're
thoughts on
absolutely
that?
right. I think an agency, in order to be valuable in this ecosystem, needs to be, I'll phrase it this way, they need to control the prompt. So we're all being taught to be prompt engineers, which I think is superfluous and going to go away very, very, very soon. And we'll use that framework because it's something that's fresh in everybody's mind. The thing about prompt engineering is the value in the entire endeavor, the entire sequence is in the prompt. Everything that happens after that is a $1 trillion AI mechanism that neither you nor I have any influence on. And as AI gets better and better and better and better and better, that will become more and more and more true. So the value is in the thoughtful human who decides there's an end goal that I want to reach, and I'm going to prompt this goal. If you, as an agency, are the one being prompted, so if the client's coming to you saying, we need to find a new service line, or we need to improve the conversion on this product, or we need to figure out how to increase our retention, you are going to be replaced by AI. The question is when. Like guaranteed 100%. You are superfluous to the process, and you exist only because they can't prompt the computer to do your job yet. So if you are being prompted, it's forced obsolescence. If you're the one prompting, that's where the value is. That's when you come to the client and say, hey, listen, we need to do this. We should look at this. We've been examining like that. Who's the one who's pushing the endeavor forward? And so whoever controls the prompt is and I own a staffing agency, and we staff EAs for companies. What I tell my EAs is, if you're the one being prompted, you're going to lose your job. You have to be the one going to the client saying, hey, I really feel like we need to improve our, whatever brand continuity visibility, because I just took this new AEO course from Kasim, and he showed us that the brand continuity and visibility is the one thing that's the key performance indicator for AEO mentions. And so I'm going to go do this, 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 this. I own the prompt. So if you're an agency owner and you're watching this, own the prompt, be proactive. You can sit back and be an order taker. And that's the thing that because I've done a lot of agency coaching, I see these agencies that are doing everything right and losing clients. And they're like, we know what to do. We do everything they ask us. It's exactly right. You only do what they ask you to. It's worthless. What is that worth? And especially when I've got ChatGPT, you know what I mean? Like, you have to do more. You have to do more and be proactive. Own the prompt.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I'm going to take that idea of if you're being prompted, that's worthless. I'm going to take that to my whole team. I've been thinking about similar concepts, but the way that you put that, I think, is really succinct and spot on. Now, let me take that idea that you had, and I'll spitball something I've been working on. So Jamie Stevens, who's a senior or chief scientist at Microsoft, she gave a really cool talk in Cannes at the Cannes Lions Marketing Festival, and she basically talked about the future of work. And much like you, she's saying it's about the prompt is the thing that sets you apart. It's not about actually doing the work; it's knowing what you're asking for that the work should be, right? So it's not about coming into the office and saying, today I'm going to do pivot tables. You never do that, right? But you do pivot tables for a reason. Like, are you doing pivot tables because you have budget questions? Great. But now, instead of doing the actual work, formulate to the AI what it is you need to do. But let's take that one level up, and let's imagine now that when you have a client meeting, why couldn't that client meeting be the actual prompt development? So the half hour you spend talking to the client,
Mm,
figuring out what is the client wanting to achieve. Well, ask them about the constraints that they have. Ask them about what they've done in the past. Ask them about things that have worked in the past. That transcript from that half-hour call with the client, that could be a beautiful 10,000 word prompt, which is the best prompt you've ever had. And now, unlike typical agencies, you come out of that meeting and you're like, shit, now I got to actually go and do stuff.
I got to do the work. Yeah.
You give it to the AI and the work is done and you move on to the next one. And your value was in asking the right questions and building that beautiful prompt.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated, and that's exactly right. The truth is clients don't know what they want or need, and those are two different categories. They don't know what they want or need, and it's up to us to kind of to pull that out of them, and in as much as is possible to also inform them of both. You can walk in and say, this is what I think you need. The risk that you run that agency owners aren't used to, you have to step into an environment where you force the loss of a client. And what we're because we're so obsessed with retention. So it's like, I'll do anything you want, just keep paying the bill. And I think that that's wrong. I think if we assume this new paradigm where we're the ones that are leading, it's like, here's where I think we should go. And the client goes, I don't want to go there. And then we get to say, that's, if we don't go there, I don't think that we should continue, because I'm the one that's driving, and I'm going to be held accountable to these results on a long enough timeline. And so the way to look at that is, if you tell the truth, whatever happens afterwards is the ideal outcome. If you lose the client, you're losing a client that you're going to lose on a long enough timeline, but you do so within the confines of a controlled environment. And then the clients that you retain so much stronger, because once somebody follows you once and it works, they will follow you to the ends of the earth, right? Like you've proven this model and this concept.
Yeah. And you also have to have a client who's willing to do the experimentation and sometimes fail, but the key is in failing quickly and learning from it and moving on to the next thing, right? So it's if you can get your client to follow you along the way with that, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's brilliantly stated. It's teaching them what failed. Like the classic example is an email marketing campaign that fails. Everybody immediately goes into copy, and they're like, fix the copy, fix the copy, fix the copy, fix the CTA, fix the landing page. Well, did the open rate fail? Because then we just need to fix the subject line, but so often we just zoom in on this global failure and say like, oh, email doesn't work. No, it never landed in the inbox. Deliverability was bad, or it landed in the inbox and it never got open. The subject line was bad, or it got open. They couldn't pull it because your images aren't querying. Like there's so many things along the way. Figure out exactly what failed, and then inform them of the failure, and then decide what's next. And that's what agencies aren't doing. They're like, hey, email failed, subject line didn't work. What do you want to do? And it's like, well, let me go ask ChatGPT then, smartass, and I'll ask myself the whole time why it is I'm paying you.
Yeah, no, listen, I think knowing when to use ChatGPT or when to go to Claude versus OpenAI versus Gemini, and then knowing how to prompt it, that's really the magic right now, right? And I think a lot of clients will eventually pick up on that. But I've always tried to push the envelope with this stuff and build my own implementations that connect certain systems together and run them through Zapier, and you kind of learn a lot of stuff along the way, and it's really cool what you can do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Does your audience know you invented conversion tracking? Have we talked about that?
Oh no, but thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, because it's funny. We figured that you were on perpetual traffic, and we figured that out live on the call. Like you're so humble about it, dude. You're like, well, when I was at Google, we were building this thing that did this thing that allowed this thing, and I was like, hold on, dude, that's conversion tracking. You're like, yeah, I guess it is. So you invented conversion tracking. For anybody who doesn't know this about Fred, like probably the most important part of paid advertising came from you and your time at Google.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you're slightly overstating it. I mean, I think
I don't know
conversion
if I
tracking
am,
as a
dude.
concept may have been understood. I just put together a technical implementation before that feature was available in AdWords at the time. And then some product managers were like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe all advertisers should be able to measure conversions and conversion tracking. So, yeah, then we launched that to everyone. But I won't take sole credit for that. But thank you.
It just you reminded me of it when you said I like to build my own implementations, because I remembered that like that was your own thing that they basically they like, oh gosh, yes, obviously we need this.
Yeah. Well, and the one that I'm building right now is the notion of using multiple custom GPTs to help me improve blog posts that I write. So rather than giving it one GPT and saying, hey, can you make this better? I've built different personas. So one of them is a skeptical reader, one of them is a fact checker. So I have a long list of that. But the problem is you have to go to ChatGPT and you have to sequentially put in the blog and then say, can you give me feedback, skeptical reader? Okay, now a fact checker, can you go and fact check this? And then at the end of the thing, you can say, okay, consolidate all the feedback into 3 key bullet points that I need to know. But that still requires me sitting at the computer and doing this. So I used a little bit of vibe coding to build a custom implementation of that so that I can just say, here's the blog, here's the 6 personas that I want to involve in checking this. And then it just runs. And a couple of minutes later, comes back to me and says, here's kind of like the consolidated feedback that all 6 personas have agreed upon is the most important to make this a better blog post. Make sense?
It makes sense. I love that. So
Yeah.
two things. Are you? What are you using? Lovable Bolt.
Yeah, I was using V0 for a long time.
Yeah,
So the first version I built in V0, the second version I did in Lovable, and it literally was two prompts.
dude, Lovable's blowing my mind right now. So I love the idea of the different personas. The thing that occurs to me, not that you asked for my help or my input, but I wonder if there shouldn't be a moderator. So
Mhm.
you make a custom GPT that decides, because the thing that scares me about the personas is you're always going to get a persona that overwhelms, but if you could get a moderator that decides
Hmm.
based off of the persona input, like where, because that way it's not decision by committee. But I think that's really, really brilliant. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I really like that because, and again, I think what we're illustrating here is take a simple concept that most people have heard about, like
Yeah.
using a custom GPT to do something, but then remove the constraints of why can I only have one custom GPT, right? So now I got six GPTs, but I had given myself the constraint of these six GPTs need to sequentially talk to each other.
Mm.
When in fact, like you're saying, maybe it should be more like a human roundtable conversation that they're having, and that requires a moderator, and that's absolutely possible.
That's really cool that you're doing that, man. My buddy Perry Belcher has a, I don't know what to call it. It's like a council that he's built that consults with him on business endeavors, and he builds businesses. It's his, and so he bases it off of real people. So he has like a Rockefeller, and he like loads it up, and he's like, you're shrewd, you think big, it's large scale, it's always hostile over, take or whatever. And then he's like, and then he'll have Rockefeller like audit his business plan, and they're really mean. The GPTs will come in and like it'll say something like, rolls eyes and questions why you haven't killed yourself yet, and then gives like really, really caustic, because he's trained him so well. But it's interesting. He hasn't done it with content. He's doing it with like business and marketing models. But I think that's really cool. It's to get to use these things in a way that's not commoditized. You have to go a layer deep. Everybody can prompt ChatGPT, but not everybody's going to take the time to create 6 different custom GPTs and then get them to talk to each other and themselves. So I think that's really cool, man. Good for you.
Thank you. But yeah, let's maybe transition here into what you're up to next, right? So, your PPC agency, obviously, seeing the light about AI is changing everything. And the key thing that it's changing that we want to start with here now is it's changing how people find things. So, talk me through what you perceived, and then let's go into what that means for the next business that you're working on.
This started with our staffing agency. I own a staffing agency called Pareto Talent, and we train executive assistants and we place them with entrepreneurs. And I was talking to ChatGPT about something, and at one point, ChatGPT came back with Pareto, with my business, and it was this moment where I was like, oh my goodness, you know what I mean? Like I've really made it. If I was asking something about like, hiring in Latin America, and it was like, well, if you want a high value EA out of Latin America, Pareto Talent Now, I have found out subsequently, because we've studied that I have 5 employees that have done nothing for the last 8 months but study how LLM source their citations, and a lot of it is heavy, heavy, heavy confirmation bias. So I now know it had a lot to do with what I was feeding it, and I realized in that moment I was like, oh, this is like ranking one on Google. I'm just ranking inside of ChatGPT. And it sent me down this rabbit hole where I paid many thousands of dollars for the domain name aeo.co. And I've launched a community because I'm not ready to play agency yet, because I don't know any of the answers. All I have are questions. I have questions and I have data. And so I'm talking to some buddies. I decided the best way to do this is just take all the smartest people that I can get to have eyes on this, put us all in a room together, and then talk about what it is that we're seeing in terms of common denominators. So I developed the thesis through another business that I own. And then I hired some people to just, all we do is, and I don't know how much of the screen share we use, Fred, but I can show you the data analysis that we're doing. I have more data on this, I think, than any human on the planet, except maybe Monik Bond, who's a really, really sharp guy. Let me show you.
Pop it up. And so, for the people who are listening to this as a podcast, we'll try to walk you or talk you through what we're sharing on the screen, but it'll also be available in the show notes.
So this is one example that I used actually at a recent talk. I have 4 employees that do the study, 1 person that oversees the 4 employees. This is 1 day in time. So this is June 11th, and the gentleman's name is Mateen. Every single day, they do 20 queries. So the first query is best boutique coffee shop in Kingman, Arizona. And they take that query, and you notice that there's a couple of specifics here. This happens to be the local brick and mortar study. We're doing local brick and mortar, local service, e-com, SaaS, informational queries, etc. So this is a high commercial intent query, and we plug it into 3 separate LLMs. In this particular instance, we use ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini. So if you're listening, all we did was take the query, what's the best boutique coffee shop in Kingman, Arizona? And we asked ChatGPT, we asked Perplexity, and we asked Gemini. That's 1 query. Well, he does 20. Where to find specialty coffee in Kingman? The top artisan coffee cafe in Kingman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we do this 20 different times. With every query, we look at the answers, but most specifically, we look at the citations, which means the websites that the LLM used in order to develop the answer, and we place those in chronological order. And then we study those URLs based on every level of analysis you would assume that we would study, as you know, from a classical SEO perspective. So what's the URL matching, keyword matching, keyword density, domain rank, href rank, traffic value, referring domains, backlinks, page speed, schema validator, etc. And then we also map it against Google position and Bing position organically. So I have hundreds of millions of data points on how LLMs are capturing the citations that they're using. Here's where things get absolutely crazy, Fred. It's blowing my mind right now. The single highest key performance indicator for ranking organically has been, for the last 10 to 15 years, links, inbound links. Guess what the single highest key performance indicator is for placement in LLMs?
Links?
Schema markup.
Ooh.
Schema. So the more robust your schema, the more likely it is that you get pulled by the LLMs. And they don't like Java-led schema. They like hard-coded schema. Now, dude, I don't know what the hell schema is. I had to Google it. I haven't heard schema for 20 years since I was built. I built websites 20 years ago, and I remember. But LLMs are pulling heavily from schema. Here's the other thing that's crazy. When you look at the overlap, this will blow your mind. I hope it blows your mind, because it blew my mind. And it's scary and exciting at the same time. When I look at, if I ask ChatGPT a question, and I look at the overlap between ChatGPT's citations, Google rank, and Bing rank, ChatGPT overlaps with organic search about 30 to 70% of the time, depending on the type of search. More for local, less for top of funnel, but 30 to 70% of the time. Perplexity overlaps with organic search 40 to 80% of the time. Guess how often Gemini or Google AI-driven engines overlap? Guess. Throw out a number.
I'm going to say it's lower. It's 20 to 40%.
Dude, I love you so much. You're the first human I've had this discussion with that actually guessed that. You're the very first one. Fred, it's 0. If there's any overlap, it's negligible. Here's what that means, I think. It means that ChatGPT, Perplexity, all these other LLMs are building on Google search. They're just searching Google faster than you. Google is building their own knowledge graph. They're not using Google search. Google's agentic, AI-driven information isn't being pulled using what Google ranks websites, because we've known Google organic ranking is flawed and gameable. We've known that for 20 years. It's for as long as you've been able to do SEO. So when people look at it and say like, oh, Google's not as good as ChatGPT, or it's not as good as Perplexity, they're wrong. Here's why. ChatGPT and Perplexity are showing you a rainforest, but they're built off of Google's old sinking island. Google is showing you a sapling that they're growing from brand new. And Google's the only one, except AWS, but AWS wouldn't be able to do it because it'd be a violation of the terms of service. Google is the only entity on the planet that has the knowledge graph to do this. So I'm so long on Google, because all other LLMs are using an antiquated model, which is Google search, and Google has thrown out their own search and is actually building delivery completely organic, from grassroots, from the ground up. So who knows how long it takes for them to catch up. But dude, I think Google is going to dominate on a long enough timeline.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it crazy?
It is crazy. And listen, I also tell people be bullish on Google, and it's not because they've stumbled out of the blocks and were very conservative. It's not because they don't have the technology. It's because they have so much regulation and oversight, and they have to
Yeah.
be very cautious in what they do. But when it comes to actually what's happening behind the scenes, they got the best in the world, I believe. And at some point, if they truly do fall behind, they're just going to say, okay, let's go for it. We need to reclaim the market here. And also keep in mind, I mean, they invented DeepMind. They invented the models that drive GPT and the transformers. So it's not like Google doesn't know what it's doing. And for you to share here what you're seeing about this sapling coming from a sinking island, I think that's brilliant.
Dude, Google historically has let other companies take the arrows. Here's the craziest part. Meta, when the congressional hearings happened about all the privacy concerns, Meta had 55,000 demographic and psychographic profiling factors. And they got pulled in front of Congress because they let people choose those profiling factors in their advertising. At that time, Google had 72 million. And all that happened is they just stopped publishing that data. The only difference was Google didn't let people segment and Meta did. But Google was a way bigger threat to privacy than Meta ever had been. But they do this thing that's absolutely brilliant, which is they wait to see what happens from a legislative perspective, public temperament perspective. They want to see where everything lands. So I think, not that I know what I'm talking about, but dude, I spent my whole life studying Google. That's all I did. I think that they're just waiting in the wings. And it's pioneers get shot, settlers prosper. Google's going to come in and they can afford to wait a decade. They can hemorrhage money and wait a decade. I've only ever lost money in the stock market. And if you want to buy, dude, I think Google's a strong buy. They have so much data and they have more data and they have the type of data that's so perfectly rich for an LLM. Facebook, Meta, has what you tell it. Google has what you ask it. Like Meta's data it's so artificial in construct because it's nothing but a bunch of people posturing about what they wish were true. Google has all the information that is true, and they have the ability to do it in a peer-reviewed fashion. So anyway, sorry, that was a bit of an aside.
Well, and I think it's really interesting. So, a couple of things. Google has more data points, but if you had 72 million data points as an advertiser, like where would you even start, right? So clearly we need the help of the machines to
AI
tell us
for
what to
sure.
do with this. And then there's a level of trust, like instead of giving you some base level control over that, why not just have the machine learning models figure it out and show the ad at the right time, at the right price to the right consumer? But what that is premised on is you do still need to tell Google what your business outcomes are that you desire, right? That's how they connect the dots in the machine learning models. So yeah, that makes total sense. And then the other thing, and I'm saying I'm basically positing that the keyword is dead, right? And the keyword is dead because we were shifting from keywords to prompts, but there's more to it than that. There's also the fact that the large language models and the chat agents, they have a huge memory. And so it's no longer just about the thing that I'm searching right now today, but it's also about the things it knows from me from when I walked into a store and I was wearing my B computer that's constantly listening. And sometimes I'm wearing my Ray-Ban Meta glasses. And so it can take pictures of the things that I like. And now when I go to Google and it was actually a cool example that somebody was complaining about. They were saying when my ads show in AI mode for personal injury attorney, now I see that sometimes Google shows my ad when somebody is looking for dentist. Okay, dentist is
Mm,
the search, personal injury attorney is the campaign that's showing. And I get why that's concerning and why you think that's a mismatch. But what if Google actually knew that you got into an accident yesterday, your teeth were messed up, you're kind of concerned about paying the bills for your dentist, and this search for a dentist now all of a sudden is like, well, did you know that the personal injury attorney can help you recover some of that money and do a
yeah.
lawsuit,
You know
right?
what's
And
scary
that's the
about
part that
that is
people are thinking about.
an advertiser is now pitted against not their competitors, but anybody else willing to pay for that prospect. And the prospect's value becomes independent of intent. So to take what you're saying, one of the most valuable prospects on the planet is a pregnant woman. Nobody spends more money with greater fervor over a longer period of time than a pregnant woman. And, fight me if you want to, that's a data-driven truth. So if a pregnant lady is shopping for anything, there are so many businesses that are willing to bid up the cost of that click beyond what most business. So now we put ourselves in this kind of weird hierarchical structure where the advertiser willing to spend the most for the avatar wins across every level of analysis. And there's going to be all these advertisers that can't actually play that game. So they're pushed off into the periphery. That's really, really interesting, dude. The implications, I think, are going to be pretty staggering there, too.
Right. And then you take a look at that example now where you're basically saying that the cost of the CPC becomes untenable for most advertisers unless you know who you're targeting. And then there's the whole notion, and Microsoft shares this and Google shares this, but people do fewer clicks when they use a chat or an LLM. And so the click by nature should become more expensive because the reason there's fewer clicks is the user, the consumer is having a conversation with the chat mode, AI mode in Google or ChatGPT, whatever it is, and they're so well informed by the time they're ready to click. Now that click is maybe 10 times as valuable as it was before, because in the past that click was an indication of like, oh yeah, I'm maybe interested, let me find out more about your business. Now
Yeah.
that click comes after they know everything about your business because the chatbot has answered all of the questions and they're fundamentally just ready to buy. They're looking for the place to go and put it in the shopping cart and transact. And even that, by the way, I say landing pages are dead because who in the world wants to go to a landing page to put a thing in a cart and actually put in their credit card? Like, that's annoying. Just tell the chatbot, I'm ready to make a decision, have it delivered to my house tomorrow. Right. But that also means that these interactions, when they do happen, they're going to become much more expensive. And so that's something advertisers do absolutely need to be ready for.
There was, to the point that you just made, there's an article on Ahrefs uh, about AI-driven traffic. Here's the title: AI search traffic converts better. 0.5% of visitors drove 12.1% of signups. And then to read the take-home message, AI search visitors convert at a 23-time higher rate than traditional organic search visitors for Ahrefs.
Well,
So you're exactly right. Like, it's going to be way less traffic and far, far, far more potent. I think we're already in a traffic bubble for most businesses. Like, that's subjective, right? It depends on what it is that you're selling. And I think that AI is going to put us in a position where people who aren't playing some level of community game, meaning they're not trying to capture a prospect before intent or awareness exists, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble. If somebody's already problem aware, if they're solution aware, you're kind of screwed unless you can pay to play, and most people can't. If they're problem aware, it's already a little dangerous, right? You need to find a way to get your hooks into people way before they need what you got. And that's a different type of marketing. That's like the Michelin star old school. It's weird how everything that's old is new again. It's like old school Don Draper style thinking marketing. It's like, how do I get in front of somebody before they'll ever need me? Which will be it'll be a fun game to play on the internet for sure.
well, and that's so interesting, right? Because PPC being so low funnel typically, but then you see demand gen campaigns and performance max campaigns, which enable you to take those existing assets and move up the funnel
Yep.
to put those hooks in a little bit earlier. But then you also think about influencer marketing, where I start following people because I like what they talk about, and then at some point, boom, they show a product, and now it's like, oh, I didn't really particularly care about that product, but I will take a look at it because I trust the person or I like the person who's hawking it. So let's talk a little bit more about AEO.co and the community you're building around that, and the advice that you're giving people as far as how they maybe put their hooks into the customer earlier on. I think there's some methodology that you were explaining, so talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so we've developed a framework that we call BRAIN, BRAIN. It's the BRAIN framework, and the BRAIN framework is our thesis is to ranking within LLMs. The disclaimer I'll make, Fred, is nobody knows. All these morons coming out saying, I'm an AI expert. It's like, really, are you? You got your 10,000 hours in? Like you just had to jump on the rest of us. So this is best guesses, but it's best guesses based off of immense amounts of data. The BRAIN framework breaks up into it's a three-parter. It's BR is brand, A is authority, IN is index. Your brand has to be strong, your authority has to be strong, your index has to be strong. Indexing are things like schema markup, making sure that you actually, like, all your directories align and the contact information is the same on your website, that type of thing. Brand, interestingly, feels like the new link building. You need to be mentioned, but it doesn't have to be a hyperlink. If somebody's saying Fred Vallaeys on Reddit and then Quora and then IMDb and then a TikTok comment, that is being compiled into kind of this repository of like, oh, Fred must know what he's talking about along this level of analysis. And then the authority, of course, is the content that you're producing, but the content is solution agnostic. It actually reminds me of what Google Plus was trying to build 15 years ago. You remember that? When they wanted everybody's Google Plus URL added to whatever it is they wrote, because they wanted to disassociate from the website and move into authorship. That's what the LLMs have been able to do. Interestingly, and this is good and bad, LLMs are massively prioritizing people over brands. So if Fred Vallaeys publishes an article, that means something. Optimizer publishes an article, means a lot less. Because people are going to mention you in Reddit, they're not going to necessarily mention Optimizer, at least not the same way. And they're going to reference you as, because a person can get a PhD and a person can be an authority, but a brand is a brand is a brand is a brand. You know, Rand Fishkin sold Moz, right? So like at a certain point, it's like, I trust Rand, I don't trust Moz. And that's it's going to be a harder game for people to play, I think. You have to be willing to be visible. You have to be willing to establish authority. So we've got this community. I don't think people should join it yet. I'm not here to sell the community per se, because it is so new. So if you want a blueprint with a checklist and a promise that this is going to work, like hold your horses, you know what I mean? Or, and that's 90% of people. If you're in the 10% of cowboys that want to come in and play and just shake this thing up and figure out what comes out of it, that's who I'm looking for. So the reason that I'm kind of on this tour is 90% of folks, hang tight. I promise we're going to tell you what works when we know, but this isn't for you. For the 10% of you that are willing to be guinea pigs, willing to see 99% of what you try fail, but get excited about the 1%, that's who I want to join the community. We've published a book. You can have it for free. It's aeo.co/free. And I'm going to, as soon as you download the book, my promise is every time we update the book, we're going to give that away for free. And the book is going to be everything we've learned so far. And some of it's really actionable. I'll give you an example. Here's the craziest part. Guess what the most valuable website on the planet is as it pertains to being mentioned?
Reddit?
Reddit. Dude, you're so good at this, Fred. Gosh, you just keep knocking things out of the park. Reddit, get this. 20% of citations from Google's AI come from Reddit. 18% come from YouTube. 20% come from Reddit. Reddit, which used to be like the ugly stepbrother of the internet, it's where all the incels go to complain about things. You know what I mean? Like, how did Reddit become the most important site on the internet? So what that means is if you really want to play the AEO game, go start establishing yourself as an authority on Reddit. Start answering questions in a very deep and meaningful way and get yourself upvoted. Like Reddit is an extraordinary repository because the LLMs value what? They value information from real people that is housed in a hierarchical structure that allows them to see the meritocratic environment. That's what Reddit is. So Reddit to Google is more important than YouTube. And that 20 to 18% doesn't feel staggering. It feels like Reddit's just barely out in the lead until you think about the size of Reddit and the size of YouTube. Reddit, I don't know what the numbers are. YouTube has to be 1,000 times the size of Reddit. It has to be, right? Probably many, many, many multiples of that. And Reddit is outpacing YouTube massively. I can share the graphic with you if you have any interest. So those are the things that we're coming up with. Schema markup is really important. There's a tag inside a schema that I think is same as. So what you want to do is you want to have hard-coded, not Java-led, hard-coded schema on your website that links to every piece of content you ever create. So if you have a Medium article and a YouTube video and a guest as a podcast, you want your schema to say, hey, this Fred Vallaeys is the same as that, and same as that. Schema markup, important. Reddit, really important. Multimodal content. LLMs love the fact that you've got a podcast that's also a YouTube video, that's also a Pinterest post, that's also an Instagram carousel, that's also a Twitter thread. Because they get to go, oh, expert. And they kind of capture some of the social signals. So we think, anecdotally speaking, I have some data to support this assumption. They're capturing the social signals and then they're bringing it back to you. So those are the things that people can do to increase the likelihood that they're ranking in LLMs. The thing that's crazy, though, is there's no such thing as rank. There's no such thing as rank. Because if you're a 50-year-old conservative, heterosexual white male, and I'm a 20-year-old homosexual black female, and I ask for the best ice cream store in 85258, the zip code that I live in, you and I are going to get very, 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 very different answers. We're used to contextual search inside of Google, so we're used to 10% variance. This isn't a 10% variance. They're delivering custom. So it's hyper specific. So the idea isn't to rank. The idea is to increase the likelihood of mention of citation. And I think small, nimble advertisers are going to win this game because they're the only ones that can create the content that will achieve the depth that LLMs want. Like, stupid example. Actually, it's a great example. I love books. I have 3,000 books in my home. I happen to know that the Scottsdale library system has used bookstores inside of all the libraries that sell these books that are donated, and you can get them for $1, $2, and $3 depending on the color of the sticker of the book. But I also know that the Arabian Library closed their store after COVID, but the Mustang Library store stays open, and the Civic Center's library is where they send all the antiques. I know that, but Borders, Barnes and Noble, Amazon doesn't. So the depth of knowledge on a level of granularity that a major corporation would never even be able to produce, no matter how much you're willing to pay for, that's the type of content LLMs want. So small, nimble, deep dive content specificity is going to reach an apex that we've never seen before in the history of humanity. And it's already happening.
Yeah, it's this whole long tail notion again. It's Will Reynolds gives a great keynote talk recently about as a brand, you got to stand for something, and that something cannot be generic. The bland marketing message is basically what you're saying, right? It's the Borders who's not going deep. They just have all the books. But if you're the brand that has the specific, like antique books or antique maps or whatever it be, that's what's going to stand out. And then I think that's sometimes a scary proposition for advertisers because thinking about having a more focused key message implies that you have a smaller audience that you would show your thing to. And that I think is true in the old ways, right? So, yes, with that more specific message, if somebody did a search for something generic like books on Google, well, who's Google going to show? It's going to be the big brands. It's going to be the Barnes and Noble. It's going to be the Amazon. It's going to be the Borders. But now, like we're saying, it's that search for books has so much more inherent meaning about who's the persona, what have they searched for in the past, what are their tendencies. And so that could now very specifically show them that one really niche product bookstore, library book sale, and actually have a tremendous conversion rate, like you were saying. The data shows from what was it, Ahrefs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think you connect all of these dots together, and it's a scary new world, but there's a lot of opportunity there.
It's fun, dude. Category kings are going to be usurped. I used to do lead generation for one of the largest hospice care lead generators in the world. You've heard of them, I promise. You know, spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year just on leads for, you know, the silver tsunami, people that need to go a place to go to be housed, let's say. Well, here's what's crazy. And I just did this because I know their business model inside and out. When you ask ChatGPT, like, where should I put my mom, let's say, they don't come up. They don't come up. It's local, small local houses with very specific local mentions and great reviews. And like, they don't come, that the aggregators are going to get nailed. And so if you haven't played the SEO game because you just thought like, how could I ever win? Now's the time. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for paid, because what paid does still to this day better than anything else is capture in an echo chamber. So maybe it's not necessarily the acquisition model for the traffic, but once the traffic is engaged with any of your properties, people should be running omni-channel remarketing, brand targeting. They should be melting the airwaves. If somebody's engaged with you in any way, they need to see you everywhere.
Yeah.
That means that they're ripe. So I would absolutely do that.
So, Kasim, name rhymes with awesome. How do you remain awesome? How, as a personal brand, what are you doing these days? Because you obviously made a brand for yourself through some amazing YouTube content and videos, and fantastic job on those. You're saying that personal brand matters tremendously into the future. What are you doing today?
Dude, I'm rebuilding my entire personal brand after learning all this. Actually, me and Julian, who runs AEO.co for me, we talked about it. I need to be the flagship. I need to show people like this is the way that this looks. The thing that's really frustrating, I have a portfolio of 15 businesses. After I made my exit, I did the thing that all poor people do. I thought I was an investor. And what LLMs don't like, if Fred Vallaeys is a professional skier and an opera singer and a soccer coach and owns Optimizer, they don't like that. They like you to be one thing, one person. So I own a staffing agency out of Latin America, and I own AEO.co, and I own Citadel.com, and I own syndications.com, and I own techstack.com. So like I have all these businesses. I own Driven Mastermind. I have all these businesses and all these tendrils, and from a personal branding perspective, it's massively dilutive. The people that I think are going to win this game are the ones that will plant their flag and say, dude, I'm an SEO, or I'm a graphic designer, or I'm, my friend Kate Shanahan is Dr. Kate Shanahan is the mother of the seed oil free movement. It's such a micro niche that's so important, but she's going to be the one that gets those mentions. So you have to kind of get myopic in scope.
Cool. Okay, Kasim, this was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your vision of the future. And like you said, again, not all the answers, or not many answers are there, but we're seeing
Really just questions, Fred. I just confused everybody.
Well, but it's good to start thinking about these things early on. So, and again, you said people shouldn't join the community, but it is out there. It is eventually going to have some answers, or at least it's going to have good conversations. And I also think even Google doesn't have answers today, right? Like everybody's sort of figuring out this seismic shift together. So I think now more than ever, it is important to be at the table, to be part of these conversations, to be willing to share what you see. And, that builds your expertise, it builds your brain, but it also gives you more information to make you smarter and eventually better at your job. So with that, any final pointers where people can find you and catch up with you?
Yeah, you can go to kasim.me, Kasim.me, and all my links are there. You can have the book for free. Would love to keep this conversation going. And for anybody out there that's cracked the code in a meaningful way, I'd love to hear it. So help me, because we're all I think climbing this muddy hill together.
Well, good. Hey, everyone, thank you so much for watching this episode. If you want to get updated when there are new ones, please hit the subscribe button and also like these. Kasim, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you for the next PPC Town Hall.